So welcome everyone to our second of the series of what we're calling Mental Health Conversations for Spiritual Communities. And we are very, very fortunate and blessed this evening to have Karen Reynolds with us. And she is an integrated therapist at Escalera Health, as well as a mental health professional with Pima County, with the jail and services there. And so she has chosen, because of these dual roles that she works in, where she works with a lot of individuals who basically face isolation, that the topic that she would like to share with us tonight is challenging isolation, and kind of a two-sided topic, both how challenging it can be for those individuals who are isolated, but also how we as a community can begin to challenge that sense of isolation, especially as we come out of the pandemic. And I'm personally am coming out of, hopefully soon, a quarantine. I've had COVID for the last week or so, 8 days. So this topic has hit home to me quite recently. I've felt locked in this study for the last 8-9 days. But certainly for the last 3 years, our society has been, undergoing just tremendous stresses about having to live and adapt to what it means to live under a global pandemic. So, Karen, we're really appreciative of your time and your expertise, and your being with us this evening to share some thoughts. And this is a conversation, so we're not expecting anything formal from Karen, but we will allow her to introduce herself in other ways that she prefers, and then also to lead us off, and then we can open it up to questions from all of us who are gathered here as people feel moved to do so. So thank you again, Karen.
All right. Well, thank you for inviting me. It's really an honor to be here. I have known Pastor Candace for a while, and really excited that she asked me to do this. One of the things, when we talk about isolation, Pastor Candace and I know each other from a ministry called Kairos Outside, which deals with women who either have been incarcerated themselves or have a loved one who's been incarcerated. And so that right there, it's isolation. The women, often feel alone if they have a loved one who is incarcerated. Suddenly they are in charge of taking care of the family and doing all sorts of things. And so being involved in that ministry has been really a blessing to do. And that's how I met Pastor Candace. And so it's kind of a wonderful reward all the way around. And so talking about isolation, I have worked at the Pima County Jail for 1.5 years. I just recently, it can be a really draining place to work. Lots of problems all the way around. The inmates especially are isolated when it comes to being away from family. And I stopped working there last week, actually. I'm still available to talk to some of the staff members who work there, but I am now full-time at Escalera. But when I was working at the jail, one of the things that I did was see people on suicide watch. And often the people in jail would feel hopeless. They'd feel isolated. They're away from their family. A lot of times family members didn't want to have anything to do with them anymore. And so a lot of times they felt hopeless and lost, and said they were suicidal. And so we would evaluate them, put them in a unit where they were watched constantly. And then at least once a day, someone from the mental health department would come and talk to them and speak with them and kind of give them some ideas for what they could do to start to heal, what they could do to start to have some positive things. And I can remember one particular person. I would do Suicide Watch daily. And sometimes we trade off because it can get to be overwhelming. But I can remember one particular young man who was away from his family. His family wasn't in the state. He had very little opportunity to call his family. It's really hard. They have to have money on the books a lot of times to make phone calls. And so this young man didn't have any money on the books. And so he often would say he was suicidal. And so we would come around once a day and talk to him. He seemed to enjoy talking to us. And so we would talk to him about coping skills and, what he could do to manage that depression, to manage those suicidal thoughts. And then after, a week or two, he said he would start to feel better. And so rather than just send him out into the general population, we'd put him on a mental health status. And if you're on a mental health status, then you are seen at least weekly. And so we would go see him weekly, but he became really lonely again. He felt much better when he was seen every day. And so after a week or two of not being seen every day, he would say he was suicidal again, and we'd start seeing him every day. Now, whether or not he was really suicidal, I don't know. But we had to take those thoughts and statements seriously. So we put him back on Suicide Watch and go see him daily. And he was really a delightful young man. And so it was, it wasn't any trouble at all to go see him, but it was this cycle with him of, I'm suicidal. So we'd see him every day, and then we'd try and step him down, and then he did okay for a couple of weeks and then suicidal again. And that was common with a lot of people in the jail, really isolated. There were also other people who weren't necessarily suicidal, but they would put in requests to see someone from mental health. And we would go see them in whatever unit they were in, and they would talk about being away from family, missing family. They may not have been estranged from family as many were, but just the fact that they weren't able to see loved ones. Some had kids or grandchildren that they were not able to be in contact with. And it's a really, really difficult thing to be incarcerated and not have contact with your support system or limited contact. One of the things that we as mental health professionals there in the jail offered was the option to put in a request to see mental health. And so they have tablets there now, and they would get a tablet and put in an electronic request. We often found, though, that some of them didn't have access to the tablets for whatever reason. They may have been on a unit where it was extra security, and so to have a tablet, wasn't an option for them. And so we would go onto a unit where they didn't have access to that way of requesting mental health, and people would stand at their door as we're going around and seeing people and say, mental health, I need to talk to you. And so I like to think that working there, going around to the different units, seeing people on mental health status, seeing people on Suicide Watch, just making the rounds on the various units, I like to think that we did make a difference and help them in not being quite so isolated. I can remember another person who had no support system at all, and had some particular issues that I was able to get some resources in the community. And so he didn't necessarily have access to them while in jail, but he was really excited to have those resources so that when he was released, he could follow up in the community and do that. I also work, as Loy said, I work at Escalera Health. I'm doing that full time and I really enjoy that. And I've just met a variety of people there. And I can, a lot of people are feeling isolated, feeling lonely. That's partly why they come to receive counseling, because things aren't going well in their lives. I was meeting recently with one woman who her husband passed away recently, and her family was scattered all over the country. And the family that was here in Tucson were not very supportive. And so, she was facing loneliness and isolation of not having support here in town, and those who were in town just weren't supportive. And so we have spent some time talking about, what you can do. Certainly, counseling has helped her. And there are other resources, that we have talked about as far as getting involved in things in the community to kind of build her support system in that way. One of the things that I have found personally is, and I was telling Pastor Candace and Loy when we first talked about doing this, is back in October, my father passed away. And I'm here in Tucson, and my family, my brother and my mom are in California. And it was really difficult for me. It was my dad passed away fairly slowly. We had him in hospice for a little bit of time. He had Alzheimer's and he had some other health issues. And so to be here in Tucson, far away from family, and have to watch at a distance was really difficult. I still feel somewhat isolated from family as we are kind of walking through the grieving process. I try to keep in touch with my mom and my brother regularly. My brother actually asked me a few days ago to kind of touch base with my mom a little bit more often, because he's had a little more difficulty keeping in touch. So we're kind of trading off and helping each other to support my mom in this. But it has been something that I've had some difficulty with in being isolated and far away from family. So solutions, how to challenge that. One of the things that certainly is available to, the people in the jail that I was talking about, and then the people that I work with at Escalera is counseling. There are lots of agencies in town. I happen to love Escalera because I work there. I think it's the best agency in town. But there are lots of mental health agencies. There are lots of places to go to for support. But the thing that has held me together, and I think some of the inmates too, they have access to Bibles. It's sometimes hard to get that because, again, you have to put in a request on the tablet if you don't have access to a tablet. but my church community has been a real blessing to me. When my dad passed away, the first thing that some of the people in the choir did, I sing in the choir, was they made sure that I got on their prayer list. And one of the things they did, he passed away shortly before All Saints Day. And so one of the things they did is they made sure that his name was read when they read the name of all the saints. And they had a little slideshow, and they made sure that my dad's name was projected on the slideshow. And that was really special to me, to know that they were there, they were supportive, they were thinking of me. And just as we're doing here, they record their services. And so I was able to send the link to my brother and my mom and say, look what my church did for us. And that was really special for all of us. And so, my church family has been there, a very good support, the choir especially. But I try to be involved in church. And one of the other things that I do is on Sundays, I run the slides. So we have someone who is running the sound. And then I go run the slides. And when it's time to sing, I run up to the choir loft and sing, and then come back and do the slides. And so that has helped me stay involved and be a part of the family. It used to be, I have to confess, that it used to be when I wasn't helping with the slides, if the choir wasn't singing that Sunday, then I just kind of stayed home and didn't do much. But it has helped me to feel more a part of things, to be more involved that way. And so having a church family, having a family of faith, has definitely been something that has kept me together, has kept me feeling good, feeling less isolated. And it's even to have Pastor Candace think of me. My family is bigger than my brother and my mom. It's bigger than even my own church family at Tanque Verde Lutheran. But it's the community in general, having crossed paths with many of you. Reverend Dick, I remember going to some of your Bible studies a few years back, and missed that too. So it's been just really wonderful to have people to count on, and then people to help. I find that when I reach out and help other people, it helps me in my isolation. It helps me not be so isolated. And again, I like to think that, helping people in the jail, or helping people at Escalera Health, or helping women in the Kairos Outside ministry, all these things help me when I help other people. So I can't think, I feel like I'm cutting this way short. But why don't we, if you're all right with this, just go to some questions, and if things pop up in my mind, I'll keep going.
Sure, absolutely. So does anyone have a question they'd like to start with? Oh, we're done then.
Well, I would say there's a reason why everybody here tuned in to this topic today. So what were your expectations, or what were you hoping to glean from this time together? I know Karen's given a lot of good information so far, but is there something that you were just hoping hoping to hear or hoping to address that we haven't yet, because I know she'd be happy to go there. So as I'm looking, I know most of the people on this screen, Karen, and most of them either live alone or have been forced in isolation because of medical issues. And so I think I mean, there's definitely some interest in what do we do in those moments when we just feel so alone. And we've spent all day with the church, and we've spent all day on Zoom with our family, or we've spent whatever, but then there comes a time when it's just us. And we're used to having a spouse or a friend or a sister or somebody living with us, and they're just not there anymore.
Yeah.
Just, what I think you've lifted up some great coping mechanisms, but I'm guessing there's a story. I feel this looks like the Brady Bunch to me. Does it look like? I mean, it's like I want to burst out in singing or something, But what are some things you all do that we could all learn from too, or questions that you might want to ask Karen?
Well, I just wanted to comment. I'm really here more out of concern for my mother, who is quite elderly. She's 98. And I just read online today that it was in the Medscape weekly that I get, and it said research shows that people who are isolated, who are elderly, have a 30% greater risk for developing dementia. And my mom has, because she's older, withdrawn. She just wants to spend time with family. She's had sets of friends in the independent living where she is, but they've all moved on to live with family or died or had to move to a nursing home because they, and she just doesn't want to attach anymore to other people who just remind her of her terrible loneliness and isolation. Which she's not that lonely. I mean, we do things with her, but we can't be with her 24/7. She chooses to live alone because she doesn't want to be a burden, blah, blah. But I do think it's having an impact, and it's hard. It's really hard. On the other hand, I feel like places like the church are well situated to do something about that, because we can make connections with people, our family. We all try to do our time with mom and include her in things, but then it takes more energy for her to do things and wears her out. She doesn't do probably more than one thing a day without really wearing her out. You know what I'm saying? So that kind of isolation amongst elders was more of interest to me because, and we stay connected, but then they kind of repeat the same things over and over. You know what I'm saying? It's just a whole different issue. It's a whole different issue with people that are starting to have memory issues and self-isolate because of the things I just said. So I don't know. I don't think counseling would really help her. But she really is not that as connected. The one place she is connected is at church. She loves church. She goes almost every Sunday, but she can't hear a thing. She's so hard of hearing. And she always says, "Oh, Candace does such a wonderful sermon." I know she doesn't hear half of it, Candace, but she loves you. So she just, is so happy to be there. And Jean, when she
does
sees
she wear
Jean,
does she wear the
oh no, it doesn't work for her. It does. She's beyond, she should have had hearing aids 20 years ago. And I just think it doesn't help.
Barb?
Yeah.
Barb, we had that problem with another woman in the church.
Mm-hmm.
We moved her up to the middle aisle, about the 4th or 5th row, and she can now hear everything.
Wow.
Maybe that's what we need to encourage her to do. Jean, would you lead Mom to the 4th or 5th row?
Because she was about ready. This other woman was about ready to stop coming to church because she couldn't hear. She could hear better on Zoom. But we said, try this because the sound is really good here. So, so you have her try that.
Well, I will. And she loves seeing people that are kind to her, like Jean and Sandy and Fred. And, she just always looks for the people who mean something to her. And it is her one connection of outside activities that she'll do. So.
Well, I think that brings to mind, my mom, going back to my mom, she used to love going to church. But she's living in a retirement home, doesn't know many people there. She knows a few people, and she, eats meals with them. But nobody goes to church. She doesn't drive. They have a bus, but that works only during the week. And she hasn't really reached out to any of the local churches. I've encouraged her, see if someone can give you a ride, but that's even hard for someone who is isolated to reach out. And so there's nothing I can do in her community because I'm so far away. I'm here in Tucson and they're in California in the Sacramento area. But one of the things that I've been really aware of and am trying to get my church community to look at is who are the people who are members of our church who haven't been showing up, and can we reach out and give them a ride to church? Can we reach out and call them? Can we do something? There are a couple of women that I can think of who again, family live out of town. When the family do come, they will bring them to church, but we can go and see if we can pick them up. There's one woman in the choir who I would like to go pick her up. She hasn't been able to sing in the choir, so pick her up in Thursday evenings, go take her to choir, and then pick her up Sundays and take her to choir. So I think that's part of something we can do.
Karen, thank you so much for that answer. And you and Pastor Candace, I think, brought up some excellent points about access and resources and how we're able to build community. And I think that's so incredibly important. So I thank you for sharing those thoughts. What are your thoughts, Karen, on folks like some of the instances you're mentioning, if they, for whatever reason, either can't, get access to a community due to transportation, medical, you name it? What are some things that you might recommend for them to do perhaps in their solo time, right? If they can't get to church or something like that, what might be something that they could do in that solo time to help build some either self-satisfaction, contentment while they're alone?
Oh gosh, you're asking the hard questions, Sarah. She's putting me on the spot. Sarah's my boss, and I gave her the link and said, "Don't come," but here's the link. Good question. Good question. So there are some things. What I do to fill myself. We were just talking before we got started is I play the guitar. And so I recently dusted it off. It was for a long time. I just moved to a new house, but before I moved here, it was kind of in the case under the bed. And then I moved to my new house and I got it out of the case and put it on the stand in the corner of the office. And last week I dusted it off and played some. And as Pastor Candace and I were talking about, I need to build those calluses up more because it hurts right now to play. But finding something that I enjoy or that I used to enjoy, but haven't done for a while, getting back to the basics. I have been practicing for the past 3 or 4 years, just spending some quiet time, meditation, getting out my Bible or inspirational readings and doing some reading, connecting with God, praying, that sort of thing. So, I think the really difficult thing, but the really important thing is going back to the basics. What did I used to enjoy that I haven't been doing. And maybe if I pick that up again, it'll help me.
That's great, Karen. Thank you. And I'm so excited to hear you play guitar for us soon. So keep practicing.
Oh boy.
One of the things that was helpful for me, I lost my husband pretty much at the beginning of the pandemic. So not only was I alone and seriously isolated, but I really didn't have any friends in Tucson. My husband had been in poor health for years, and when he felt okay, we traveled. So we just never took time to really settle into Tucson. And I thought, I need to find something to do that has nothing to do with him. We were married for 48 years, and we did everything together. And so I thought, well, I love music, and I used to love to sing, and I really can't sing anymore. And he couldn't carry a tune in a bucket. So I called a friend on the East Coast who is a retired opera singer, and we used to work together years ago. And I said, Sarah, would you give me singing lessons? And she said, you bet I will. And I said, can you do it over Zoom? And she said, of course I can do it over Zoom. So for about a year, I took singing lessons, and I certainly will never be able to sing, where anybody will ever hear me, but it was a lot of fun. We reconnected. It gave me something to do and something to think about. So, if you can encourage people, I think, to do something that they never even thought about doing or thought that they could do, that's kind of useful. And there are so many online resources now. You don't necessarily have to go anywhere to do it. I mean, you can take art classes online and all kinds of stuff. So.
Aaron, I had the same kind of thought as Laura. One of the times I was back home, my cousin, the church there got new hymnals, and he went through all the hymnals and pulled out all those that were dedicated either to or by people in our family. And he presented me with the one that I had dedicated to my grandparents. And I was thinking that's a valued thing in my bookcase. And the thought of, when people are in church hear an old hymn, they just kind of close the book and sing on their own. And wondering if some of the old hymns and hymnals, because I'm sure every church has old ones sitting around somewhere, be distributed so that people could go and just open it up. And even if they just read the hymns, the words are, like reading a Bible verse, but in a different format.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. One of the devotionals that I use, you read a scripture, you read someone's thoughts on that, and then it gives a hymn. And so you pick that hymn and read the words to the hymn, sing it if you know it. And that's a way definitely to, that I like to do my devotionals in the morning.
Well, I know every time that our choir director does, like a shuffle and says, we'll do one verse from every song you holler out. People don't want it to stop because they're so excited of listening.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I was thinking, Jean, my mother, who had Alzheimer's for quite a long time before she passed away, my sister and I would go and visit her. My father was still living. We would visit them, and she couldn't put a sentence together. She could barely talk, but we would wheel her out into the rose garden and sing some of the Methodist hymns with her, and she could sing along. And the joy on her face was just amazing. Now, I'm one who, for health reasons, has to be isolated and has been since COVID began. I've been in maybe 4 stores in the last 3 years. But I'm very blessed. I have a wonderful husband and a lovely home with a pool where I can swim, a lovely neighborhood where I can ride my bike. But it does get long. And I too, among my New Year's resolutions are I loved the piano, and I played all through my childhood and my well into my adulthood, and then got away from it. And when one of my children had lessons from a very talented teacher in a nearby town, I started lessons up again and did that for a while. And then I've left it again, and the arthritis has gotten worse. But one of my New Year's resolutions is to get back into that and start with playing the hymns. And another, I was a teacher of German, and another is to do some more of my reading in German again. What you had to say, and Karen, about doing for others, it's hard to do when you're isolated at home. But I have made it a point to reach out where I can, when I can, with cards and Zooms and notes and so on and so forth. And that always feels helpful. I set up a lot of Zooms with a lot of people with whom I haven't been in touch in a long time. And that has been great fun. And we are able, we have 2 outdoor patio heaters, and we're able, even in this cooler weather, to set up what we call our Putin table, a huge, long, our table with a couple of additional card tables, and invite a couple over for lunch. And they'll sit way down at one end, and we'll sit way down at the other. And that is a real life send. So, and one of my biggest sorrows is not being able to go to church during this time. And I just love the fact that I can be in the services on Zoom, that I can attend Bible study on Zoom, and that I can be here now. Yeah, so thank you for that. Yeah. That's pretty much my story.
Karen, you said that there are a lot of mental health professionals in Tucson, but we're constantly hearing about the fact that it's incredibly difficult to find one. And if you do find one, you have to find one that takes your insurance. And if you manage all that, then you've got to wait for 6 months to get an appointment.
Exactly.
So what if one calls into someplace like Escalera, do you have resources that will help them get along until they can actually get in and see somebody?
Oh, wow. We're trying to keep our waiting list fairly short, but there still is, a wait time. Gosh, that's a good question. I might defer to Sarah, since you're on the call. Any suggestions?
Happy to. Yes. Thanks, Karen. And thanks for asking the question, Laura. So Escalera is abundantly blessed with a team of 17 therapists, and we have 5 more coming in for interviews in the next week. So I think the great team that we have, Karen being one of our exceptional therapists, really makes the difference to retain mental health professionals. To Karen's point about working with these populations, there is an incredibly high burnout rate, unfortunately, very low retention rate for a lot of companies. And so we're trying to change that at Escalera through a variety of things from the management level to provide support. But to answer your immediate question, there are providers in town that offer immediate walk-in availability. And, although Escalera is not what we call a crisis center where you could walk in for immediate availability, I think Karen would agree with me. If someone did come to our doors, we would not turn them away, right? A mental health professional would meet with them and provide them with resources. So to answer your question about specifics, there's a couple of agencies here in town that are really helpful. The Crisis Response Center, often referred to as the CRC, is located down at Banner Hospital, Kano. So that's down on the south side of town. And they do not turn folks away. So that would be anybody experiencing a mental health crisis could walk in, ask to be seen, and they would be seen right on the spot. Palo Verde Behavioral Health is another great resource. They do have limited beds. Knock on wood, so far we've been lucky with our referrals. We haven't seen much turn away there. So that would be another great resource. And then the community-wide crisis line, I think, is an underutilized and such an important tool. And that phone number is 520-622-6000. And that's connected always to a live person. So it's considered a warm line, 24/7 availability. And if it calls for it, they can actually send out a mobile team to meet the client where they are, whether that's at their home, at a church, at a place of business, at the park even. They can send folks out right away. So those are some of our best resources, but I do encourage folks, and I would tell my friends this, right, on a personal level, don't give up. If you run into a couple of walls where there is a wait list, please keep calling. Sometimes our wait lists grow and sometimes they shrink rapidly. Sometimes, cross your fingers for us, we hire 5 therapists at once and have lots of availability immediately. So please always encourage folks to use those imminent resources if they need it, and don't give up on trying to get permanent counseling.
Sarah, could you put the name and phone number of that crisis line in the chat for us?
Sure.
Thank you.
This kind of continues that question a little bit and ties in with our previous session on mental health challenges in school environments. But Sarah, the other challenge that folks have run into, particularly parents, have been finding those mental health counseling and therapy options for teenagers and children. There's a lot of providers who have expertise in that area, but they don't have availabilities. So do any of the ones that you mentioned, such as Escalera itself or Palo Verde Behavioral, do they also see minors?
Great question. So Escalera at this time, unfortunately, does not. We are 18 and older, but both Palo Verde and the CRC both see minors.
Okay, thank you. I'll just go ahead and read out what Sarah put in the chat, particularly for those who would be watching this on the recording. She wrote, the community-wide crisis line, again, that number is 520-622-6000, and it provides 24/7 services and a mobile crisis team that can be sent to meet folks where they are. Karen, I was particularly struck with the stories that you had of just kind of ordinary things, that faith communities can do, that sometimes we take for granted, but that could be so instrumental in the lives of individuals who are facing isolation. Like, for instance, ride sharing and trying to, put together a network of just helping people to come to church, dealing with practical issues like Candace mentioned about where to sit in the sanctuary where the
Right.
acoustics are better, or how to assist with a hearing aid. My mother is now dealing with a hearing aid and it comes to her phone, and she loves it. But how that works in church, and how to adapt to that a different kind of environment. And then, just thinking of, things like music, and what you mentioned about, just having something to do, helping with the slides, or, I think some people feel like, they may have talents that they're reluctant to mention because, well, I'm not good enough to say, provide the music and worship. But what if there was just an opportunity once a week or once a month for folks who play music just to get together and play with each other in the fellowship hall? It doesn't have to be for worship, right? It doesn't have to have that level of pressure or stress on it. Just play for fun. I'm a musician as well, and I started playing music when I was 10. I would say that over the course of my life, music has been one of the most consistent therapeutic things I've ever experienced.
Right.
And particularly because being a musician brings me into contact with other musicians. And I've played in a number of bands over the years and toured professionally, but those friendships and relationships have stayed with me all my life. And those bonds are very powerful. So I think having a hobby or an interest like that can connect you with other people. It doesn't have to be music, it could be other things, but it does open doors to network with people and to build friendships and just to spend time with each other. I know that's not been easy to do that with COVID and in social distancing, but to the extent that people feel comfortable trying to be in physical spaces with each other, and maybe the church can think about some creative ways in which we can use our spaces to open that up. I know, Candace, that we have that oil painting class, right? Or is it, I don't know if it's oil, but it's a painting class, and people come and do that for fun, once a week as well, as some of our Bible studies and our book discussions and things. So, I don't know, having a jam session once a month.
Love that idea.
Yeah, I do too.
I've led drum circles in the past, usually for
That would
kids,
be fun too.
but that would, it could certainly be something that even older folks might enjoy too.
We still have all those buckets, Lloyd. We could just set
There we
them
go.
up, set them up in the fellowship hall and let people come and bang on them. That'd be fun. We should do a drum circle. That would really be fun.
Yeah, you just sparked my thoughts. Years ago, when I was really young, that was years ago, I was in college and I worked at a summer camp, a church camp. And I was the music leader for the camp. And we had an arts camp. So we got together, and at the beginning of the week, we'd get a script, and the kids would learn a play and do the performance on Friday night. And there was one year, I just love this. So as the music person, I came up with the music, and I do a little bit of writing. So I wrote some songs. We had a professional author there who wrote the script. And we, worked together and created this play and had a performance for the community. And I still keep in touch with those people. You just sparked a thought that, just doing something like that, getting people together and creating, a play or something to share with other people, I think would be a wonderful idea. I like that a lot.
I'm always putting up here in my space little sayings that I like, and this came on a Christmas card, and maybe you're all familiar with this. From heights and depths no words can reach. Music is the soul's own speech.
Yes. Yeah.
Isn't that the truth? Yeah. Yeah.
Well, Mary, if we all showed up at your front door to jam with you, could you stay behind? Do you have like a screen door or something you could stay behind so we could all like be there with you? I'm just saying, if we all showed
I'll
up,
think about
we don't
that.
want
I'll-
to. We wouldn't want to put you in danger. But if there was like a way where you could be inside and we could be outside, but you could participate with us.
Yeah, when it maybe when it gets a little warmer. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, we'll jump in your pool. We'll steal your pool.
You stay inside. We'll be in the pool, and we'll
Yeah,
all
we
sing
keep the-
underwater.
We keep the pool heated, which is wonderful. So I get to use it year round, which is just wonderful. Yeah. Yeah. I know from talking with my daughters who are both involved in education that mental health issues among kids are big right now. And one of my younger daughter has the daughter of one of her close friends who has had to withdraw from school. She's a high school student and is receiving mental health care at Brown University. Yeah, and I have another friend here in Tucson, two of whose grandsons have had severe mental health issues in high school. Yeah, so it's tough for these kids. And I think when Terry was talking with us last week, she was talking about the importance of mentoring. And yeah, that's of course, I was a high school teacher, and that's something that I regret that I can't do, but
You could do it via Zoom, though.
I could. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, and I wonder sometimes if maybe we couldn't kill several birds with one stone, and I probably shouldn't use
Such
that
a
metaphor,
violent
but
metaphor.
It is a violent metaphor. Yes. But what if we were able to find a way to network and pair folks with a lot of wisdom and experience in their lives with kids and teenagers for conversations, in that kind of mentoring. And it doesn't necessarily even have to be like the career mentoring, I'm going to help you get a job, but it's more like, I've lived my life, I've made a lot of mistakes and I've done some good things, and I'd be happy to listen and to share, and just talk, and it could be that that would help the isolation on one hand, and it would help folks who are younger to feel heard and valued on the other.
Yeah.
You have to make sure they could understand you. I had a young man at one point who was putting up my Christmas lights. And so I was out there talking to him, and he finally looked at me and he said, "You remind me so much of my grandma." He says, "You talk old school."
Well, you know what? My experience with even just some of my own kids and everything is that old school is not necessarily such a bad thing for them. I mean,
yeah, no kidding.
I mean, seriously, they're like going into flip phones and other things, and they're doing some things that we would look at as like totally retro, and like, why would you even take a step back like that? And they're like, you know what, we're oversaturated with everybody telling us we have to be, digital natives. We want to try to find out what life was like, before all of this got crazy. And there's some real interesting wisdom to that.
Maybe we need to, because we had the tutoring system,
Yeah.
and I know several of the tutors were, Mary was one of them. Several of the tutors were from here in the complex where I live. And every time I see them, they ask when we can start tutoring up again, because they miss it.
I
And
miss it.
we just, we barrage Fred with questions about, well, how's so-and-so and what are they doing now and what school are they in? And if we maybe could somehow do a Zoom sometime with all of them or, some of them in a way, it might be good for both sides because they felt a very trusting relationship with us.
Yeah.
That was the social graces and the trust were the two biggest things that we worked with.
Yeah, that's a great idea, Jean. I would love that. Mm.
Well, we are here at 7:00, and I want to respect everyone's time. But I also, if there's any final questions that folks have for Karen, now would be a good time. We also want to give Karen the final word for anything that she would like to share in terms of ideas that have come to her or her own observations over the last hour.
Well, I certainly have really, really enjoyed this. You've come up with some great ideas. Loy, I like the idea of just getting a group of people together and playing instruments and singing, and doesn't have to be anything formal. I think I might try and get that together at my church. And yeah, it's been just a joy to spend the last hour with you. If it's all right, I'd like to just put my number in the chat, and if anybody has any questions or follow up, I would welcome that. So I'm going to go ahead and do that if that's all right.
Mhm.
Absolutely, and I'll read it out as well before we leave, so that
All
folks
right.
on the recording can get that too.
It would help if I spelled my name right.
While Karen's doing that, I'll do a little plug for next Wednesday. So a week from today, we will have Dr. Chris Stevenson, who is a licensed clinical psychologist, and he's worked in business consulting and specializing in clinical psychology, and he's worked at Genesis Healthcare for many years. He's retired now, but the theme of his topic, he's doing psychology of aging, and he wants to talk about the perception of age and how we manage our lives to develop and maintain a sense of self-sufficiency. So he will be, this will not be a Zoom session. This will be an in-person in the fellowship hall at the church on the Houghton campus at 6 p.m. next Wednesday. So a week from tonight, on February 1st at 6 p.m. in the fellowship hall. We will record it, however. If you can't make it, we will have a recording up on YouTube, hopefully a few days after that. But that, again, will be Dr. Stevenson joining us in our third installment of this series. We have a total of 5. And if you would like to know more about that, please go to our website, and then on the events page, you can see a detailed listing of all of the speakers who have really graced us with their gifts, and we are so appreciative and grateful, and especially Karen, to you tonight. I'm going to read what Karen put in the chat. So folks, if you want to reach out to her, her phone number is 520-448-1185. That's 520-448-1185. Again, Karen, thank you so much. We are indebted to you for a wonderful conversation that we've all benefited from this evening, and hopefully some ideas of how faith communities can work to, like you said, challenge isolation.
Mhm. All right. Well, thank you very
Thank you.
much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Karen.
Thank you, Karen.
Thank you.
Susan, Sarah, we're glad you joined us.
Yes, thank you, Sarah.
Thank you. I'm so proud of Karen. Thank you.
All right. Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Folks, take care.